Victoria from Biblio Lifestyle, and you're listening to the Reader's Couch podcast, the show that will help you bridge the gap between living a full and busy life to one where you're reading, learning new things, and having fun. In today's episode, I'm so excited to chat with author Caroline Scott to talk about her novel, Good Taste. In Good Taste, we meet Stella Douglas, a food writer who is asked to write a history of English food, which is intended to lift the spirits of the nation. But this is set with the backdrop of the Depression, when food is scarce, and a lot of food is being imported. So we see Stella as she travels across England in search of traditional English food and discovering how complicated that history is. Plus, we see her navigate things in her personal life as well, and she navigates love, loss, friendship, and she's also discovering herself and defining how she wants to make her way in the world. Readers, I really enjoyed this book. It was so much fun, and it's a perfect mashup of historical fiction, meets women's fiction, meets culinary travelogue, and a test kitchen television show. In this episode, Caroline and I talked more about her book, and we had so much fun creating a quintessential English menu that we think the main character in the book, Stella, would approve, and I hope you will try. But before we get into the episode, please leave the podcast a 5-star rating, write me a review, especially if you love the show, and share this episode or any of your favorite episodes with your bookish friends. It really helps the show. It doesn't cost a penny, and it keeps me and the show going. So thanks in advance. And now on to the episode with author Caroline Scott. Hi readers, welcome again to the Reader's Couch. I'm your host, Victoria Wood, and I'm super excited to welcome on the couch today, Caroline Scott, to talk about her new book, Good Taste. Hi Caroline, welcome to the Reader's Couch.
Hi Victoria, delighted to be with you. Thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you here. Really enjoyed this one. Can't wait to talk about it. But I always want to know how authors are feeling. How are you feeling now that Good Taste is available for readers to just, go into stores and get a copy?
It's out today in the US, and that is really exciting, slightly scary, as these things generally are, and also rather surreal. I wrote this book in 2021 in my spare bedroom here in deepest rural France. And to think that today it's on shelves in bookshops on another continent is really quite bizarre, but lovely and exciting. And brilliant to be working with William Morrow again. They brought my first book, The Puppy Wife, to the States, and I had a lovely experience of working with them. Mm-hmm. And it's been the same again. I adore the cover they've created for me, and I'm really excited now to see how American readers are going to respond to it. It's out today. I've just had a few early reviews, and so far they're really generous, and it's lovely to see that people are understanding what I wanted to achieve from this book. So yeah, so far good and exciting. Thank you.
Yay, I love hearing that. This book was such a treat, but before I get into it and share my thoughts and, ask a bit more of you about it, tell readers what they can expect when they pick up a copy of Good Taste. What's your elevator pitch? What can readers expect?
It's set in 1932 in Britain at the time of the Great Depression, and the lead character is a food journalist called Stella Douglas. She's just been commissioned to write a history of English food. Her previous book hasn't been a great commercial success, so when she gets this new commission, she's surprised and excited, and she really wants to deliver the style of book that her editor wants. That is to say, a book which is patriotic and celebratory, positive and slightly jingoistic in tone. As I say, we're in the middle of the Great Depression, and her publisher wants it to be a book that will raise national morale, that will make people feel good about their national story and their cuisine. But as Stella sets out on her research and begins travelling around the English countryside and speaking with the public, she begins to discover that this history is really rather more complicated. And then she also starts to come under the influence of certain people who have their own agendas and who would like to manipulate the conclusions that Stella is reaching. It's also a book about a woman who is mourning the loss of her mother and who is trying her best to look after her emotionally fragile father. She also has rather complex, conflicted feelings for her best friend, Michael. So to put it in a nutshell, it's a book about food, about what Englishness means, and also about a career-minded young woman who's trying to make a way in the world, in a society which still has a lot of boundaries for women.
Yes, absolutely. And I want us to first talk about Stella, her personal life, before we get into, the journey of finding a traditional English food and writing about it and trying to recreate these recipes too, which was quite fun to read as well. But you mentioned Stella lost her mom. She's returned to Yorkshire to care for her father. He is reasonably so grieving. Her first book, like you said, did not do well. So tell us about Stella in the beginning, before she has to take on this job, where she is in her personal life and what she is trying to accomplish before she starts her research and writing, just who she is as a person.
Sure. She's in her late 20s. She writes for a magazine called Modern Woman magazine. She writes the food column for them. She's previously lived in London, had rather a glamorous life in London, sort of enjoying all the markets and party scene and everything. And she's lived in Paris. But now, as you say, she's been brought back up to Yorkshire, to her native county. Her mother passed away 12 months ago. They were a very close family, so she's deeply in mourning still. And she's looking after her father, who she's very close to. So she's juggling career and family. And as I say, she has a best friend, Michael, who's a chef in London. They've known each other since they were students. And Michael has just, as a surprise to Stella, started a relationship with a new woman, and observing this, Stella suddenly realizes that she has rather confused feelings for her best friend. She's rather closer to him than she perhaps ought to be. So as she starts off on this new chapter of her career, she's also got an awful lot going on in her personal life, in her emotional life. She's a bit conflicted, she's a bit confused. So yeah, she's got quite a lot to cope with at the start, really. Yeah.
Yes, she does indeed. So getting to this new assignment to find and write about the history of British food, it's quite overwhelming, but also quite a bit challenging, she was finding at the time. And to give readers context, it's set during the Depression. So there's a lot of food that is being imported. There is rationing, of course. So why did you, I guess I'm really curious, why did you decide to set a book about food during a time when food was hard to come by, if that makes sense?
Absolutely. I was inspired to write this book by reading a book by a lady called Florence White, which was published in 1932. She was probably England's female food journalist. And by the 1920s, she'd come to the conclusion that English food was in peril, that we were in danger of forgetting our traditional techniques, our traditional recipes. We were losing touch with growing locally and knowing the source of all our food. An awful lot was being imported by this time. And she set out to rescue English food. So she did lots of broadcasts on the radio. She put notifications in local newspapers wanting people to send her their recipes. And she wanted to collect and to catalogue all these recipes, and which she ultimately did in 1932. And I thought she was such an interesting situation. She was such an interesting character that I was tempted to create a fictional character who had the same background and the same challenge. Stella is very different than Florence. Florence was 69 when she wrote her book. So they're totally different personalities, but I'm putting them sort of in the same context, giving them the same challenge that they have to come up against. So yeah, it's an interesting time in food culture. English food has its highs and lows over the years. We're on a bit of a sort of downwards trajectory through the 19th century. We start importing an awful lot of our food. We start to lose touch with growing our own. We forget our traditional recipes. So yeah, in some respects, I think Florence was absolutely right. English food was in trouble at this point. So yeah, it's an interesting time to be tackling it.
Yes, I found it quite interesting, the place and time, more specifically the time, because again, we're going through the Depression, there's rationing, there's lots of food being imported. But yes, it sounds like British cuisine was in peril at that time. Now, I have to say, I was drawn to this book because I found myself questioning myself, what exactly is British fare? What is English? Because when I think of the food I grew up eating or the food I liked, it tends to be foreign. And I remember you mentioned in your earlier pitch of the book is that English food has a complicated history, because when you really start to break things down, especially modern English food, it comes from somewhere, and it tends to be somewhere that was a former colony. So tell me about Stella as she is going to these different hamlets, as she's going to find what is traditional and what she started encountering along the way.
You're absolutely right, Victoria. It's a very tricky question. What is English food? Because we've always imported, we've always been influenced by other countries. We've always brought ingredients in from, as you say, from the colonies and from all over Europe, from further afield. And that goes right back to our earliest history, right back to sort of Celtic times. We're importing meat and food culture from other countries and ideas from other countries through the Roman era, through the Saxon period, through the Norman invasion, all right back through our history. I mean, if you look at the first published English cookery book, which was published in 1390, it's full of spices. That's the food that was typical of the Norman period. And it's quite like the food of North Africa. The recipes that they cook are quite sort of like tagines, full of dried fruits and spices. They have this sort of sucré salé kind of flavour. And that is sort of fashionable aristocratic cuisine for about 400 years until the Reformation, really. And then it changes over the years with each dynasty of royals coming in, with religious changes, with emigration, with immigration, with colonization, with trade, all through the centuries. We've always imported and a lot of what we think of as perhaps traditional English recipes, they aren't really at all. If you look at something like fish and chips, which we might think of as a ubiquitous English dish, and that only starts to exist about the 1860s. Potatoes come from the New World in the 16th century, but we don't start really eating them regularly until the 18th century. And chips, that's actually a French way of cooking potatoes. And fried fish comes in with Jewish Ashkenazi immigrants into London who are frying their fish in matzah meal. So really what we think of this sort of as essentially English dish, it really isn't at all. It's the product of trade, of travel, of immigration. And that's true of so much of our food culture, really, once you start looking into it. And this is the dilemma which Stella then encounters, that how do you define and put a boundary around what is English cuisine? Because really, it's a nebulous thing. We've always been importing. So yeah, that is the dilemma.
Yes. But I loved seeing her navigate that, from reverse engineering recipes to try new things and questioning, well, this ingredient, this isn't English, this was imported, and kind of going back and forth there. I felt like a culinary travelogue, but history at the same time.
Thank you, Victoria.
Yes, it was just so lovely. But of course, we have her relationships in the forefront as well. We see her struggling with love and family, but also what kind of person she wants to be, what kind of book she's trying to write. But yes, it was fabulous. So I think this will be great for readers, not just of historical fiction, but just people who love food and travel, because Stella does travel. And of course, personal relationships, because we have the love, the loss, romance, friendship, and so on. So I really appreciated this one.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'm really happy to hear that.
So I want us to dive into English food some more, because I know some of our listeners here, they might just be Anglophiles, but even if they're not, we're readers and we like to be transported through food as well. So I would love for you to share some food recommendations based on some meals I'll suggest, and you'll just tell me what you think Stella would think is the most English of them all to have. Sounds good?
Okay, sounds fun.
Okay, what would Stella recommend someone have for breakfast? What breakfast item, if nothing else, would be quintessential English?
In the book, Stella enjoys a full cooked English breakfast, and I think she would recommend you to try the same cooked in a lovely sort of country pub or something with really good quality local bacon and sausages and egg sauce from a local farm, with some lovely bread, local butter. It's a dish that we're known for. It's called an English breakfast. It's not actually that old. Once again, it's something that only really comes in the 19th century, but it's something that is celebrated, and I think rightly so. A good English breakfast is a good thing, I think. I don't know if you agree, Victoria.
No, I agree as well. I remember recommending to a friend who was visiting at the time, though I'm in the States now myself, to get an full English. And if you're lucky, you just might get some black pudding with that you
oh gosh, I love black pudding. How did I forget the black pudding? You're quite right. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Had to squeeze that one in there because I think yeah, absolutely worth trying. Okay, I often have fond memories of just, walking into town for lunch. What would you recommend for someone going to a local restaurant, local pub for lunch? What would you recommend? And what would Stella recommend they have?
Oh gosh, something quintessentially English. We do have lovely seafood, actually. I think that's rather underappreciated. We have really nice sort of crabs and prawns and things like potted shrimps, which are very sort of peculiarly English, or set in butter with spices. Some lovely English cheese. We do produce good cheese. Yeah, just sort of like to snack on just sort of a lovely mixed plate of fish and seafood, perhaps some nice locally produced ham or something. Not necessarily something that's been sort of cooked and sort of is with sauces and things, but just a sample, just tasty little local delicacies. I think both Stella and I'd be quite happy with that. Yeah.
Yes, I love fish as well. I think it is underrated. People don't often think of just, plain fish. They think of the battered, the fish and chips. But I think a good fish would be great. Okay, so now we just want something to snack on, nothing too heavy. We're still thinking of having supper later. What would you recommend?
Well, one of Stella's quests in the book, which is something I personally love as well, is a bit of Grasmere gingerbread. I don't know if you've ever had it, Victoria. Yeah, have you had it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, really strongly spicy gingerbread that has a very sort of particular crunch to it, a particular texture. And as Stella finds out in the book, it's really hard to reproduce it. I've tried loads of different recipes over the years, and I've tried to hunt this one up, but I can never get it right. I keep on trying because it's tantalizing, because I love it. But yeah, it's the peculiarity of the Lake District. And I love all gingerbreads, but I think that's a really special gingerbread. So yeah, we could have a little snack of that and a nice pot of tea. I think we're doing quite well, wouldn't we?
Yes, I think we would. Okay, so supper time. So we're getting ready for dinner. What would Stella recommend for dinner? But also a bit of a sweet treat, because we do love our pudding.
I could tell you to eat some eels or some offal or something, as poor Stella has to do quite a lot in the book. But I'm going to be nice to you. I'm going to recommend that perhaps we have a lovely pie. England is known for its pie. We're quite good at pastry. Something like a lovely steak and kidney pie, maybe, sort of meat cooked long and slow and really lovely and tender and in beautiful gravy. We do that well. To have that sort of in a nice pub, beautifully presented, we're not going to go wrong with that at all, I don't think.
Agreed. And it's quite filling as well. So that will top us off for sure. Thank you so much, Caroline, for sharing these recommendations.
Pleasure.
Oh, it was so fun. And now I'm hungry.
Me too.
I put myself in trouble there. But I want to get into your research for this book. I know you mentioned you were reading a book previously that kind of inspired this story. But what other research did you have to do? And also, did you discover anything that really surprised you along the way?
I come from a family of cooks and cookery book buyers. So I inherited from my grandmother and from my mum quite a big library of cookery books. So I had sort of quite a good place to start from, really. I live in a house full of cookery books. But in the course of researching this book, I did buy an awful lot more of them. And now it's wonderful that we can actually access a lot of documents online, a lot of archives online. So you don't necessarily have to travel around the world any longer. We can sort of bring things up on screen, which makes researching an awful lot easier. Did quite a bit of cooking. I tried quite a lot of recipes out. I was writing this book during the COVID lockdown, so I didn't get to travel as much as I would have liked to have done. But I did do things like I went over to Ely in Cambridgeshire trying to eat eels. I was really committed to researching this book and doing the full-on experience. And I went around lots of restaurants in Ely trying to find eels, and sadly nobody would serve them to me. But maybe that was a blessing in disguise, perhaps. Yeah, and mostly it was researching, mostly it was reading books, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So on the note of the eels, because I have to go there, have you ever had jellied eels?
I lived in London for many years. And so I had to, it's one of those things you've got to do, isn't it, really? So, yeah.
Yeah, it's because I was going to say it's on the menu in quite a few restaurants in London, you know.
It's you have your pie and mash and your eel on the side, and it's got to be done, really, hasn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And for my listeners who are not familiar,
that's a good word.
Right. Yeah, I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to make it appetizing. But yeah, they chop them. I think they boil them. I love a nutmeg. I can spot a nutmeg anywhere. And I've had some with, a tad bit of nutmeg. I think maybe a bit of lemons, and it gets very gelatinous.
It's that mixture of the jelly and the eel skin and the bones, and it's very hard not to get both in your mouth. And I think there's a way of eating them, and maybe I failed in my technique, but I'm not quite sure I'd go there again, to be absolutely honest.
No, it tends to be a one and done. But if you're in London, odds are you'll find it on a menu there. I think it's a bit tricky finding it elsewhere. But if you're adventurous, give it a go.
I highly agree.
Yes. So you have now, this is your second book here in the States, Good Taste. You had previously published The Poppy Wife. For listeners who are not familiar, could you just really share that one real quick?
Of course, yes. It's quite a different tone to Good Taste. It's a novel that is set in the aftermath of the First World War. It's a story of three brothers who go off to war, and only one of them survives. Harry, after the war in 1921, he's working as a war graves photographer. He's going around cemeteries in France and Belgium taking photographs on behalf of... And at this point, 3 years on from the war, Edie, Harry's sister-in-law, receives an envelope with a photograph in it of her husband, Harry's brother, Francis. But Francis died in 1917, and this photograph appears to be taken after the war. So what's going on? So Edie and Harry both set off on parallel journeys through Belgium and through France, trying to discover, could Francis still be alive? And it's a story about love and loss and grief and conflict, and their two parallel journeys and where they meet and what they discover.
Yes, absolutely. So looking back now, you have two books here in the States. What would you tell your younger writing self if you could tell her anything looking back?
Gosh, good question. I'd probably tell myself that sometimes it's okay to abandon a manuscript and start something else. As a young writer, I spent a long time endlessly polishing up, editing manuscripts. And sometimes you've just got to realise that this isn't the one, this isn't the hook that a publisher's going to go for. Sometimes it's better just to put that aside and start something else. And that's not failure. You will learn from that. So you can recycle some of that material potentially. But don't be frightened to give up and to try something new. I'd also just tell myself just to keep on going. It's a question of stamina and determination as much as anything, I think, getting into publishing really, and luck. Your manuscript just has to arrive on the right person's desk on the right day when they're in the right mood and they're receptive to what you're giving them. So yes, younger Caroline, keep slogging on, have faith, be determined, you will get there.
You will get there. I love that. So let's get into your reading life really quick too, because we love hearing what our authors are reading and we love a good recommendation anyway. So share with our listeners the last book or books that you finished reading that you'd now recommend.
I'm in a book club in my village, and we're a really diverse group. We're all different nationalities, different ages, different backgrounds, and we often disagree about books. But the last one that we read, we all gave it the thumbs up, and that was The Salt Path by Raina Wynn. I don't know if you've read it, but it's a true life story of a couple who, through no fault of their own, lose their family home. Themselves penniless. And then also she discovers that her husband also has a terminal illness. So they're standing at a real precipice in life. They don't know how much time they've got left together. And they decide to do something really crazy. And they set off to walk around the coastal path of southwest Britain, all around Devon and Cornwall. And it's really arduous. They've got no money. They're living on noodles and fudge, and they're going through terrible weather. But along this journey, his health begins to recover. He did have this wasting illness, but he begins to recover his strength and his stamina. And psychologically, they both start to recover from this terrible experience too. They realize what matters to them, and they're living in the moment. There's a real sort of like mindfulness element to it. And it's just beautifully written. She writes natural landscape really beautifully, and it's really evocative. You can really sort of feel the sunburn and the salt spray of the sea. And we all agreed that it was just a really uplifting, life-affirming, inspiring book. It feels authentic and really honest, and we all felt we learned from it. So yeah, I definitely passed that one on as a recommendation.
Oh, love it. Thanks for sharing. And no, I haven't read that one, so now I'm excited. I love it. So what book would you say was your childhood favorite? What was that one book that you were just captivated with that you still remember to this day?
Oh gosh, I started on things like Pippi Longstocking and My Naughty Little Sister and books like that, but I think they were probably bought for me by my mum. When I first started making my own selections, I think what I really probably loved most was Alan Garner. I loved The Owl Service and The Weirdstone of Brisingham and all those sort of folkloric, eerie books that there was a genre of in the 1970s. And I still rather do sort of like that kind of book, really. I like something a little bit eerie with sort of a sense of history and a sense of landscape. And yeah, I'd recommend Alan Garner to young people, definitely.
Oh, I love a good atmospheric read. So yes, I can relate to that as well. But what books are on your nightstand? What books are you looking forward to reading in the year ahead?
I think it's a really lovely time of year because normally through the year I do a lot of reading for research, but at Christmas I let myself read books for pleasure. I'm quite antisocial. I think it's the loveliest thing just to get cozy, nice glass of wine, nice book. So I'm really looking forward to that, and I'm making lists of books at the moment. One I'm really looking forward to reading is Edward Carey's new book. I loved his previous one, Little. He has this really quirky, macabre, gothic style of writing, which I really like. He's humorous and he's dark. His new book is called Edith Collar, and it's about a young woman who is living in a theatre with her father in Norfolk in 1901. It's all sort of falling down around them and she's rather dominated by her father. And then one day he turns up with a new wife. So I think that sounds like really good fun, and I love his style. So yeah, that's the number one book I'm looking forward to reading over Christmas.
Oh, I'm a big Edward Carey fan as well.
Yeah.
I think we have a lot in common in terms of reading.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yes, indeed. So I know we have some listeners. Sometimes life happens. You fall into a reading slump. You're having trouble kind of getting out and start reading again and loving reading again. But also some folks are struggling to find time to even start reading. They haven't read in years. What advice would you give to someone who hasn't read in years and is trying to get back into it, but also someone who's fallen off the wagon and they're trying to get back on?
I say, firstly, don't put pressure on yourself. Don't force yourself to read some great tome that's won lots of literary prizes. Read something that you suspect you're going to enjoy. Pick up something by an author that you've maybe enjoyed in the past, or something that your friends are really enthusing about, or something that you maybe have a connection with, that you identify with the character or the setting or something. I'd say also maybe have a go at a different format, perhaps have a go at an audiobook. I've really got into audiobooks over the last couple of years, and I just find it a lovely thing to be able to cook, to garden, to take my dog for a walk, and someone's telling me a story at the same time. I think that's marvellous. So I'd say, yeah, if you're stuck, have a go with an audiobook. Perhaps pick something being read by an actor whose voice you enjoy. I'd also say make yourself a really nice environment to read in. Find yourself someone that's really cozy and warm in a space that you look forward to spending time in. But foremost, don't put pressure on yourself. Enjoy it. Don't force yourself. It should be a treat. It shouldn't be a chore. So be nice to yourself and take it easy.
I love that. I love hearing that. I couldn't agree with you more. So we also love indie bookstores. So share with our listeners your favorite local or just one you discovered on your travels.
I live in rural France, so I don't actually have an English language bookshop close to me, which I sincerely wish I did. I really miss browsing and getting recommendations. So I'd say if you have got a local indie bookshop, cherish it or support it. I have had some really brilliant support from some bookshops in the UK because a lot of my previous novels were set around the First World War. They've done really lovely sort of displays around the 11th of November. And I so appreciate that. That's really touching to see. One of the books that has bookshops that has particularly supported me is then the Grove Bookshop in Ilkley in Yorkshire. So I'm putting a shout out to anybody. I'm doing it for them.
Yay, love that. So getting back to your book now and kind of wrapping it all together, I know you've written the book. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a great historical, literary, culinary, travelogue kind of book. It's really good, really heartwarming in the end, but also it was just fun. For me, I never expected it to be that fun. And this is a fun book. What are you hoping readers might think or feel after they've turned the last page of Good Taste?
I hope they feel that they've been on an enjoyable, diverting journey, that it's made them feel sad in places perhaps, and also hopefully made them laugh in others. I'd love it if they felt an emotional connection with the characters, and if they felt satisfied at the end that the right people ended up together and in the right places. I say when I'm reading for pleasure, I really want escapism. So if people feel that they've been taken away from their own worries for a little while, if they've been taken away from all the grimness on the news, then I feel like I've done my job. And if they feel inclined to share it, to recommend it with friends, to share it on the internet, that would be absolutely brilliant.
Absolutely. And that's one thing about readers. We read a book, we love it, we'll rave about it. Caroline, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a real pleasure, Victoria. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Reader's Couch podcast. Please subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Until next time, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks again for listening, and happy reading.